to say was thank you to DriveTech in particular for helping us with this work. And of course, they have provided financial resources to help fund the work, but they've also been a real partner helping us with the substance of the report. And we've really had a very positive relationship through the whole project. And what I want to do now is just bring in Charlie Norman, who's Managing Director of DriveTech, to say a few words of welcome. Charlie.
Thanks, Rick. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
No, brilliant. So yeah, as Rick says, I'm Charlie Norman. I'm the Managing Director of DriveTech. Probably worth me just explaining who DriveTech are for those of you who may not know who we are. So DriveTech is a company founded way back in 1991. It was actually started by a Thames Valley police officer, a guy called Chris Howell, who established the business really with a focus on and a will to want to make a difference around road safety. And he founded the business with the vision of eliminating road death and serious injuries. And the sort of evolution of that business kind of came around in 2004 when he launched in partnership with Thames Valley Police one of the very early versions of speed awareness courses, which obviously have increased no end since then. And in fact, as of the most recent year, about 1.5 million people a year go through those speed awareness courses. And I think that had a founding vision, had a really positive impact on road safety. And then in 2009, I think that vision obviously resonated very well with the Automobile Association, the AA, and the AA Charitable Trust. And in 2009, the AA bought DriveTech, and that's where, as a business, we remain today as part of that group. So that's kind of a little bit of a history. So why did we want to get involved in this report? I think probably a couple of things. Firstly, Rick and I, we met a couple of years ago, didn't we, Rick? I think in Waterloo Station. We originally met to talk about roadcraft at the time, which was something that you were about to release a new version of, and we got onto the strategic review of policing that Rick was underway, and we felt that roads policing should absolutely be part of that, and at that point sort of moved on and agreed to sort of that's been great. And I think the other thing that driving view and desire to want to do things in this area is, obviously, we probably all know that the number of people killed in road crashes over the last 10 years has plateaued, and we as a business can do in this sort of space to try and help or improve and move that agenda forward is great. So
Charlie, you may need to just go off camera, Charlie. If you go off camera, Charlie, your audio might be a bit more reliable just for this moment.
Oh, am I freezing? Am I?
Just occasionally.
Just a little bit.
Okay. So sorry about that. I hope that's not been too bad. Just in terms of the report, I just wanted to say a couple of thanks. I think we had a fantastic roundtable a few months ago with people from the police, people from the world of academia, industry, government, charities, and I think we've had a couple of really positive sessions which have helped contribute and I think have resulted in what I think is a brilliant piece of work, Rick, in terms of the report. I think the recommendations are excellent and realistic. And I think in particular, Rick will come on to this, but recommendation 5 talks about creating an entity along the lines of SAGE, the Scientific Advisory Group on Emergencies, to kind of get together and advise on emerging threats on our roads. And I think that recommendation in particular is something that I think DriveTech, the AA, would be would welcome. And in addition, I think be very keen to be part of in terms of how we might take that action forward and make that really happen. So that was probably the main things I was going to say. I think the lasting thing I would want to say is that there's been a lot of work put into the report. Like I said a minute ago, the recommendations I think are excellent. I'd like to make sure that this report has a lasting impact. I think it provides a great opportunity for all of us to really make a difference in world of road safety and roads policing, and I think it'd be a shame if we didn't take that opportunity. So I hope that's not been too broken up, Rick, but I'll go back to you.
That's great. No, it's fine, Charlie. We just missed you a little bit in the middle. We got the general gist, and once your camera went off, it was perfect. So yeah. Great. Thanks very much, Charlie. So now what we're going to do is we're going to present our findings, the Police Foundation's findings. So I'm going to share my screen, and then hopefully you should be able to see this presentation. Can you let me know if that's okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. So the future of roads policing, then I'm going to kick off, and then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Ruth, who I'm going to be completely honest and say has done most of the work on this. So I stand here and take the glory, but Ruth has done a huge amount of work on this report and is really the kind of brains behind it. So enormous thanks to her. I'm going to just walk you through how we're going to do the presentation. What Ruth in a moment is going to talk you through some of the trends in road safety and the changing nature of crime on the road network. In other words, the kind of basic challenge. And she's also going to talk about the decline in roads policing over the last decade, what's happened to roads policing as a core capability within policing. And Ruth will describe the various elements of that. And then I'm going to come in and talk about how technology is transforming the way we use the roads, talk about who is responsible for road safety and how they can collaborate together. We have a short note on the impact of the pandemic on road safety and roads policing, and we just wanted to note some of the recent trends around that. And then we'll come on to the recommendations at the end. So Ruth, do you want to kick off with the talking about the challenge?
As you can see here, with the first graph, for the past decade, the number of road deaths has stalled. So the UK has one of the best road safety records in the world, with 28 road deaths per million inhabitants in 2019, compared to an EU average of 51. However, while many European countries are seeing marked declines in road deaths, the UK, as you can see from this second graph, has remained stubbornly constant. This graph here, although far more people and cars are killed on the roads, that's only because far more people are car drivers. As you can see, the most vulnerable drivers, motorcyclists, pedestrians, and cyclists, are most likely to be killed on the roads. And that's because while cars are getting safer with more modern technology, these metal boxes are safe for those in them, not for those outside of them. So moving on to sort of behaviours perpetrated by car drivers. The majority of drivers admit to breaking the law at some point in their driving career. For many people, driving laws are seen as inconveniences. Between 79% and 99% of drivers admit to breaking the law at some point. So, particularly around speeding. 1% of motorists have drink drove in the past year, which rises to 25%. And need much higher of those who are aged under 25. And non-wearing of seatbelts is also among the high-risk groups. In 2020, 29% of motorists said they made calls on handheld mobile devices while driving, but up from 24% in 2019. So all these behaviours are known as the fatal four. So speeding, driving over the alcohol limit, failure to wear a seatbelt, driving while distracted. So, and these are the behaviours that roads police aim to target. On top of all of that, roads police are seen as an asset in the fight against crime. By crime, I mean things like county lines, modern slavery, what people have previously said was real crime. But seeing roads police as an asset to take down this real crime, it gives the impression that road safety isn't important enough, and they need another way to justify themselves. And it's been this attitude, the idea that roads police is a nice to have, that has led to this. So as you can see, there have been sharp declines in the number of roads police, and moreover, these declines are disproportionate compared to general police. So, for instance, between 2013 and 2019, the amount spent on all policing reduced by 6.1%, but spent solely on rules policing dropped by 34% in real terms. And as you see in this graph here, the number of road traffic officers fell by 22% between 2015 and 2019. They fell by a further 18%. Of course, this data is not exactly an accurate picture because it doesn't include double hatting, where officers take on two roles. They're a firearms officer and a road police officer, which is great until there's a firearms incident, and then there's no one policing the roads. So decrease in the number of people on the roads also declined with a decrease in detection of offences, apart from speeding, as you can see. But even speeding is a variable, and that's detected by cameras. But some courses admitted they don't have no working cameras, or the cameras are very rarely turned on because there's not the money for them. There's a postcode lottery in place. Some forces have 10 times more convictions than others. Various studies show a strong link between police enforcement and reduction in road deaths. So if people think they're likely to be caught, they won't break the law. But as this data from the AA shows, people think it is very unlikely that they will see a police officer on local roads, motorways, and major roads. So we have a problem. So moving on. Are you going to take over now, Rick?
Thank you, Ruth. Yes, I'll take on from here. As Ruth, I mean, the key insights that I think we draw from that articulation of the challenge are, first of all, that the UK's road safety record has plateaued. You know, having had this great record with road deaths and casualties falling, it has over the last decade plateaued. And we've seen no further progress. We've seen that contrast with other European countries, where we have seen across Europe a 23% reduction in road deaths over the last decade. Something's going wrong here that isn't going wrong in some other European countries, although some of those are coming from a worse baseline than we are. We do, you know, obviously historically have a better record than many of our European neighbours, and we can also see a correlation between that and the fall in the number of road traffic police, and the reason we think that correlation may be more about causation is because there is really strong academic evidence in the evidence that the research evidence that we looked at, that the physical presence of police officers on the road can make a significant difference. And so we have a section in the report where we talk about the efficacy of road policing, and some people I think, well, you know, this is all about technology, we can just get more cameras and so on, but there's plenty of, if you look at the data, we've seen a drop off in enforcement in terms of, you know, the number of breathalyzer tests taking place, the number of fixed penalty notices for you know, holding a mobile phone while driving, that's also fallen. So there are lots of these things which can't be dealt with by cameras, unlike speed, but which are and which do rely more on the presence of the police, and we can see significant drops in the enforcement activity around those, which I think are obviously related to the reduction in the numbers of police officers available on the roads. So I'm just going to talk a bit about some of the consequences of this, what we describe in the report as a deprioritisation of roads policing. The first thing is, officers are often abstracted to assist in local operations and serious incidents, meaning, as Ruth said, you know, there's no one left to police the roads. Some forces have adopted a kind of a whole system approach, so that they don't actually have any dedicated roads police, and they simply use their response officers to deal with roads issues as well. But there's a challenge there about making sure those generalist officers are properly briefed and trained to carry out the roads policing task. And we identified, and it's not just us, HMI CFRS has identified significant gaps and challenges there. We also identified, you know, a lack of resources and increased demand on roads officers can affect their, you know, their well-being, and we had some evidence of that, which we collated. Significant disparities in the amount of resource dedicated to the investigation of fatal collisions compared to the amount of resource dedicated, for example, to investigating homicides, and we can discuss, you know, the reasons why homicides are taken more seriously than road traffic collisions, but it's, you know, it's just true in terms of the amount of dedicated resource dedicated to investigating those things. There's a significant difference. We do highlight in the report some good examples of international best practice, which contrast with this. We saw, for example, in France in the last decade, they really started to emphasise road safety in a way they haven't before. More cameras, more roads, more traffic police, leading to a 43% reduction in casualties. We see in Norway the adoption of a Vision Zero approach, which I'll come on and talk about in a moment. So plenty of places are trying to get a grip on this issue, but unfortunately, we think over the last decade the capability has been depleted in England and Wales. Technology is obviously transforming the context in which roads policing takes place. Autonomous vehicles are around the corner. Already we see many driving functions are becoming more and more automated. Some have argued that, you know, automation means there'll be less need for police officers on the roads, and so, for example, you'll have self-limiting, you know, speed limited vehicles, vehicles that automatically seek to obey the rules. But we also found quite a lot of, apart from the fact that is still quite a way off, and so there's still a challenge now. We also found some skepticism about that, you know, automation may present some opportunities, but there's also some evidence that it makes drivers complacent, and in circumstances where they actually do need to take control of a vehicle, it makes them slower to do that because they're relying on the vehicle itself to do the work. And so we are skeptical about this notion that automation is the kind of magic bullet that's going to resolve it. Similarly with things like cameras, you know, cameras, you know, can pick up, certainly in terms of speed, they have had a significant impact. But of course, drivers do drive around cameras, they work around cameras, and cameras can't deal with all of the different roads offences that we're talking about, particularly, you know, consumption of alcohol, you know, not distraction. A lot of these things are not things which cameras can necessarily help with, and so we still think there's a really important role here for the human capital of the police service to play in road safety. There are some. We also found evidence of some of these other technological innovations which are having an impact. Some of them negative. The e-scooters, for example, were flagged up as a potentially. Lots of people told us that those were a potentially very sort of worrying development in terms of safety, because of the, I'm sure everybody's had to dodge an e-scooter on the pavement. Sort of, it's they're becoming quite a challenge. We've seen the rise of dash cams, which is good. So cyclists in particular are using these cameras to try to monitor what's going on and find examples of drivers who are breaking the rules. But we found that not all police forces are set up to consistently use the data that's being made available by the public. Some are doing pretty well with it and are using a lot of the information to then go and enforce. But there's a very inconsistent picture around those cameras. Partnership and collaboration. There's lots of good examples of partnership out there which we can build on. Community Speed Watch, we saw really good evidence of that. It's obviously, thinking about the austerity picture and how roads policing has suffered because of that. It is a cheaper way of delivering some of this, sort of mobilising the community to do it. But there was good evidence that community speed watch schemes can really have an impact on speeds. The road safety partnerships we think are good, but we think they have also suffered from cutbacks and deprioritisation, and so that's something which ought to be addressed. There's some really good strong relationships between policing and academia, which are helping in this space, and we're going to hear later from Helen Wells from the Roads Policing Academic Network. Operation Close Pass, which is an attempt to protect cyclists. Some really good evidence that that's had a significant impact. And one of the key insights I think we draw out of all of this is the importance of thinking in a systemic way about road safety. So it's not just a question of, we say we do think having more cops in cars is good and is important, and we think we've suffered because of the reductions in that over the last decade. But we also think you need to take a wider systemic approach, which is this idea of focusing on, the way the roads are designed, the way the whole system around the driver can encourage or discourage dangerous behaviour. So we're talking about taking a kind of whole system approach here, and that's something which obviously requires significant partnership working, which is something we want to encourage. In terms of the impact of COVID, we did see a reduction in road deaths, quite a significant reduction, for the obvious reason that there were fewer people driving on the roads during the various lockdowns. Cyclists traffic increased by 46% in 2020 compared to 2029, and the fatality rates of cyclists decreased, and the casualty rates decreased as well. Again, probably related to the fact that there were fewer cars on the roads. But when comparing traffic deaths to the number of miles driven, people were more likely to be killed in 2020, not less. And there's a small but significant increase in speeding due to fewer cars on the roads. And this suggests that for a significant minority of drivers, the lack of traffic density was encouraging, meaning they could drive in a more careless and faster fashion. And so some interesting lessons, I think, there from the impact of the pandemic. Obviously, we can't just implement pandemics as a way of improving road safety. That would be a rather dramatic and not necessarily good thing to be doing. But I think there are lessons that we can draw from the experience. In terms of our conclusions, then, Britain's roads are more dangerous for vulnerable road users than for other countries with a similar number of road deaths per head. So we do find that there are significant issues here in terms of cyclists and pedestrians. There's police enforcement is proven to reduce road deaths, as the fear of getting caught is one of the few factors shown to persuade motorists to abide by speed limits and other restrictions. there have been significant reductions in the numbers and funding of traffic police, and the evidence we've seen suggests that this may be linked to the stagnation in progress in terms of reducing road deaths. One challenge is, of course, that roads policing is not overseen by a single government department, or road safety is not overseen by a single government department. And so in a sense, as we say in the report, the risk is held by the Department of Transport, which is responsible for road safety, but the assets are controlled, or at least funded, by the Home Office, which is responsible for policing. And so these two things sit across each other, and that creates something of a tension and a challenge here, that, you know, cutbacks in one area have led to a problem in another. And I know there's a road policing review going on at the moment, which I know colleagues will talk about in their contributions, which I expect is trying and tackle this challenge. And the other thing is that road safety is not seen as a priority. So we found very inconsistent presence of road safety in the police and crime plans, which are set by police and crime commissioners. And we've seen many police forces, in order to save money, deprioritise this area. We do think there needs to be a shift towards this safer systems approach, this kind of whole systems approach, thinking about road safety. But we do think that we do need more roads police. I think the evidence is quite clear that that is a key ingredient here, and the kind of, I think, quite lazy view that oh well, technology will sort it all out. The evidence that we've seen does not support that conclusion. So recommendations then, we think that the Home Office should include roads policing in the strategic policing requirement. For those who don't know, the strategic policing requirement is there to set national priorities for police forces. We think that given that it's not been prioritised locally, there is a strong case for it going into the strategic policing requirement. I know the Home Office is considering this at the moment. We also want to see the strategic policing requirements strengthened, because as it currently stands, you know, chief constables and police and crime commissioners only have to have regard to the strategic policing requirement. It's not entirely obvious what happens if you don't have regard to the strategic policing requirement. And I certainly think the strategic policing requirement needs to be beefed up and have a bit more bite and a bit more sort of consequence for local forces, you know. So these are things that they ought to be doing, and making clearer what the expectation is around that. But we definitely think roads policing should go into it. We think the National Roads Policing Lead should be supported by a dedicated secretariat within the NPCC, so that they can look at the data, find the areas of concern, support forces, particularly with data and intelligence and so on, in ways which can kind of make sure the whole system is properly mobilised to tackle the problem. We think the government should appoint a road safety commissioner comparable to the victims commissioner, someone whose role is to promote road safety throughout government, but also more widely. I think the evidence from things like the victims commissioner is that these are positive roles, particularly where you've got an issue which cuts across government departments, and in a sense you need a single champion. And so we think a road safety commissioner would be a good national champion for this whole agenda. We are very supportive of the Vision Zero approach, which they trialled in Norway, and they are rolling out in London. And this is the point. It's not to say essentially that we ever think realistically we'll ever have 0 roads deaths or 0 casualties on the roads. I think that is probably too much to hope for, but it's to set a goal. I mean, sometimes you have to set a really ambitious goal in order to mobilise the system to try to achieve it. So whatever the sort of, you know, practical realism of that, we think actually setting that really ambitious goal and saying that actually we shouldn't tolerate these deaths. We should be trying to prevent every single one if we can. And so what is in our control? What levers do we have to try to do that? So setting the ambition at that, we think, is important for mobilising the whole system around it. And we also think, as Charlie said in his comments, that there should be an entity brought together, a bit like SAGE, which works on the sort of crisis the scientific advice around emergencies. We think there should be a standing group bringing together the police, the government, academia, industry and the third sector, with the aim of looking ahead, anticipating how the challenge is morphing and changing in the future, what is technology doing and so on, and then trying to develop a systemic response to those future challenges. So we think that would be a really important next step. So that's the presentation.